One good thing about the passage, this chapter 12 of Ecclesiastes, is to realize, don't be surprised, and when you go through aging, you're not alone. People have been going through this for a long, long time. But how do you navigate this whole thing? And so we come in our study of Ecclesiastes to our last study. Now, let me just hasten to say, it's a little bit too early to take our summer break. So, Lord willing, beginning next week, we'll begin a short study on the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes is really an introduction to the Sermon on the Mount there in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And it's a compilation by Matthew of everything Jesus taught directly from Jesus. It's a great privilege to teach because when you're teaching the Word of God and it's the Beatitudes, it's right the very words of Jesus himself. And it's about an attitude that's behind kingdom living. It really is kind of futuristic because it's going to tell us how people think and what people do 1,000,000 years from now. That is, in the new heavens and a new earth. And so I'm looking forward to that study. I've been spending the last few weeks just studying, reviewing it. And so we'll pick that up next week. We'll do 2 at a time, Lord willing. And we'll do those. And we have really 5 more weeks. And then we'll take our summer break. Well, as we come to the last chapter of Solomon's personal journal, he's reflecting on aging. And we know that he's probably later on in the 70s, 80s when he writes this, because of the insight that he has on this navigation of aging. The late Dr. Herbert Locker was a well-known Bible teacher whose life and ministry continued well on into his 90s. And this is what he wrote, quote, Benjamin Disraeli must have had a chip on his shoulder when he wrote in Coningsby, youth is a blunder, manhood a struggle, and old age a regret. Since I have passed my 93rd milestone on life's pilgrimage, I'm living a living lie to old age being a regret. Certainly, as I look back over past years, I have many regrets, but I have no distress of mind over being an old man, he says. I am deliciously satisfied and contented in spite of the fact that I am now old and gray-headed, as the psalmist expresses it, and I am daily proving that godliness with contentment is great gain. There's hope. There's hope. We hear jokes as we age, like when the gleam in your eye is really from the sun hitting your bifocals, that we tend to get winded when we play chess. Our minds make contracts that our bodies can't keep. We hear that we sit in a rocking chair and we can't get it going. Our knees buckle, but our belts won't. And that everything hurts. And what doesn't hurt doesn't work. See, aging is not an easy thing. They joke that it's not for sissies to navigate. But if the Lord doesn't return soon, we're all going to be looking at it. Some of us are looking at it right now. I watch you walk in. And some of you, it's just around the corner. But there's supposed to be honor to this aging, at least according to the scriptures. We're told in Leviticus 19, verse 32, in the face of gray hairs you shall rise, and you shall honor the face of an old man and fear your God. Boy, you ought to tattoo that somewhere and put it on your grandkids. Matter of fact, in Proverbs 16, verse 31, it talks about honoring the hoary head. Isn't that great? Hoary head. I had to look up what the word hoary means. It means white hair. White hair. And throughout the scriptures, age was always something that was esteemed and respected. Not so much in our culture. Solomon, in his closing portion of his journal, he's going to address this thing. No frills, straight on. Last chapter of Ecclesiastes. If you haven't already, open your Bibles to Ecclesiastes chapter 12. And he begins with a description to the aging. Throughout the journal, Solomon, he doesn't sugarcoat anything, has he? So it's going to be with this total honesty, he's going to go ahead and do the same thing here. Now here in these first 5 verses, kind of gives you a taste that basically, his bottom line, aging's not fun. Here's what he says, verse 1. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near when you will say, I have no delight in them. Before the sun, the light, the moon, the stars are darkened, and clouds return after the rain, In the day that the watchmen of the house tremble, mighty men stoop, the grinding ones stand idle because there are few, and those who look through windows grow dim. And the doors on the streets are shut as the sound of the grinding mill is low, and one who arises at the sound of a bird. And all the daughters of song will sing softly. Furthermore, men are afraid of high place and of terrors on the road. And the almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags himself along, and the caperberry is ineffective. For man goes to his eternal home while mourners go about in the street. Now right away you say, boy, I'm sure glad I came to this study. But notice he begins by this big word, emphatic, remember, remembering. Not just taking note, but acknowledging the presence of God in your life. It's the only real shot you have to get through this without being grumpy. Matter of fact, Proverbs chapter 3, verse 6 tells us that indeed, acknowledge him in all thy ways, and he'll make your pathways straight. Without a special sense of the presence of God engaged in your life, you're going to find it very, very difficult. That's why a great psalm to memorize, I memorized a long time ago, is the 23rd Psalm. Because it reminds you, I know from time to time, I will get these feelings of being overwhelmed. And I'll just quote to myself out loud so I can hear it. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He guides me to the quiet waters, and there he restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod, thy staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. And yes, you anoint my head with oil when I get beat up a little bit, but my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy going to follow me all the days of my life. And I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Sometimes you need to be able to pop that psalm out. Because when things get dark, and as we get into how dark they can become, that's just a wonderful psalm to remind us of God is our shepherd. Jesus is there and in his presence. So it is in your youth, he says, you need to begin to be thinking about aging. So some of you are younger, you're not going to be wasting your time. You need to know this stuff so that you can be wise in preparation for it. And he says you need to do this before the evil days come. Well, what are the evil days? Well, he tells you, those days I have no delight in them. It is because there's more pain than pleasure. And so he's talking about this aging and becoming aged. We are told, well, what you do is you just act young. And if you act young, you'll feel young. No, you may feel young, but you look like a clown. And the fact is, there's going to come a point that you can't act young. And so you might as well embrace the fact you're not. Now, he goes back, and notice what he does back in verse 2. He says, now, before the sun, before the sun, the light, the moon, the stars are darkened, and clouds return after the rain. What's he talking about? Well, like Arizona, and where Solomon lived, the most part of the year was what the sun could be counted on. But after the autumn rains, the chill of winter could be felt. Clouds would begin to turn the light of the sunlight into gloom and block the light of the moon and the stars. And these clouded skies were the signs of winter. You are moving into winter. And he's talking here about the winter of our life. When pains were many, pleasures become few. Earlier days, the rains would come. We had storms. But after the storm, we got a little breather. You know, we got sunlight afterwards. So we get through this too shall pass. The only problem is that now our storms that come hit us as age, it's followed by another picking storm. We are not getting better. A year from now, I will not feel better. I will not be younger. I will not be sharper. I am going the wrong way because storms come and they go and they follow one another on its heels. Sorrows, disappointments just keep coming and we do not get better. Now, the picture changes because we're getting so depressed on this part. He changes the picture to a great household but in decline. The picture here is a sad one. It's the gradual dissolution of every part in decay, hastening to ruin. And he begins, verse 3 and 4. In the day that the watchmen of the house tremble, and mighty men stoop, and grinding ones stand idle because they are few, and those who look through windows grow dim, and the doors on the street are shut, as the sound of the grinding mill is low, and one will arise at the sound of a bird, and all the daughters of song will sing softly. He's going to give us a list here of describing being aged. First one, he says, the watchman of the house trembles. He's talking about that which we used to protect the house. Hands, our arms. But our arms begin to tremble in weakness. And where we used to be able to protect ourselves and others. I know when I first married Holly almost 55 years ago, I said, Holly, you never have to worry about anybody hurting you. I will be there and I will stop them. Now I tell Holly, you better learn to run. I think the best I can do is slow them down. The mighty men stoop. What mighty men stooped? The strength that held up the house. Those were the legs. And they now begin to bend and bow. And the legs are the first things to go. Have you guys noticed? And we begin to bend under the burden of the weight. I find myself in the last few years, sometimes I'm not thinking about it, and I'm walking like a drunken sailor. I'm saying, now, come on, get this right, left. I know I live in Westminster. Average age is 87. We're the puppies at 75. And, we don't have people fighting over parking spots. We have people fighting over where to put their walkers so we can go ahead and go to the restaurant. The grinding ones stand idle. What do you think the grinding ones are? What does the mill work for this body? Our teeth. And our teeth, he says, begin to become idle because there's few. Now, praise God, we have dentists, and we still got them. But the fact is, back in these days, they were losing teeth right and left so that they could not. All best they could do for their food was to gum it to death. Then those who look through a window grow dim. What do you think he's talking about there? Eyes grow dim. Things look more like a mist, a shadow. And the thing that's so sad is the enjoyment of beauty is lost. It's left a memory. You remember how beautiful those bright colors were. Now, we have glasses, another blessing. But they did not at that time. Then he says, the doors on the street are shut. The sound of the grinding is low. What part do you think he's talking there? Our ears, our hearing. The door to conversation, social interaction. We are always being told, you ought to get hearing aids. Holly keeps telling me I need hearing aids. I go, but I can hear. Except for I need to be paying attention. Because I'm sitting there thinking about something. Holly will begin to talk to me, and I almost always miss the first word. I'm amazed how the first word is so important. Because I don't get the first word, I get the rest of her sentence, hear it clearly, don't have a clue what she's saying. And I'm pretending that I do, which causes other problems. He says, one arises at the sound of a bird. Gentlemen, all of us with shrinking bladders. At 3 o'clock in the morning, we could all call each other, couldn't we? Say, hey, you up? Yeah, I'm up. The fact is, sleep no longer is a sweet restorer of a tired body because we're up. Holly asked me this morning, did you sleep well? Yeah, I only woke up 3 times. And the thing that you're excited about is you can get back to sleep, only to be awakened 2 hours later. It might even be the sound of a bird. Then he says, the daughters of song will sing softly. Here he's talking about the loss of the voice. The lips that used to sing out loud. My mentor is John MacArthur. John was 29, I was 19 when we first began to do ministry together. I was a junior high pastor for him for 7 years, which does retard your social development, and it explains some of this, all right? But I remember John is now dying. John is 85, and his lungs are filling, and pray that when he's released, that his family will be comforted. But the last time I heard him speak, it was almost like a whisper. And broke my heart because I remember John MacArthur The way he would speak with loud and volume and strength. And the voice begins to be barely heard. And singing. You know, I find myself, when we're together and we're praising God and singing, I just find, Darryl, just shut your mouth, close your eyes, and listen to the choir that surrounds you. Because I sound like a crow that's been choked. Then number 8, men are afraid of high places and of terrors on the road. He's talking about feebleness, a fleet. In other words, the unsureness. We lose our confidence in our steps. And we fear what? What's one of the greatest fears of people who are aged? Falling. Like those walkers, that's not because they can't walk. That's for balance. That's so we don't fall. I know that up to my office over at Scottsdale Bible Church, they have these steps. And I just kind of just bounce right up them. Now there's 25 because I found myself counting them. 1, 2, 3, 8. But they're made out of metal with cement and rocks. Just waiting for me to fall and kill me. So what I do now when no one's watching is I hand the handrail. All of a sudden I'm thanking God for handrails. This is normal. We all go through it. The almond tree blossoms. You know, when the almond tree first blooms, almond trees, the flowers are pink. And it's a beautiful, pinkish, gorgeous thing. Until they're about to drop and die, they all turn from pink to white. What do you think he's talking about here?
Right hair.
Your hair. I know you ladies fight it, but it's going to go gray. By the way, gray is kind of the new in, isn't it? My wife, you know, she finally went full gray and looks great. And it says the grasshopper drags himself along. This is that light hop. It is gone. We're dragging our gait. About 3 weeks ago, I tried running about 20 yards. Funniest thing you've ever seen. I mean, I'm looking at myself, and then one off the glass, and I'm going, that looks really weak. Grasshopper drags himself along. We don't have that gait anymore. And then the caperberry, ineffective. Now, the caperberry was a berry that was used back in these days to stimulate appetite. And that could be sexual or just appetite for life. The only trouble is that I was having lunch with some of my older friends just a couple weeks ago. And halfway through the conversation, I realized, you know, we talk about food like we used to talk about girls. It's just the whole thing changes. Your whole perspective changes. So here's the early house is fallen to pieces. And the question left is the inhabitant. Like I told you, when I was younger, I didn't think much about having a soul. I was told I had a soul, so I have a soul. But I look in a mirror, and what reflects back is me. But I tell you, now you look in the mirror as you get older. You younger ones, you still look you. But you're going to find a time you're going to look in the mirror and you go, you know, I don't think that's reflecting the real me. First of all, I'm better looking than that, and I feel better than that looks. I sometimes will look in my eyes in the mirror just to see, is anybody in there? Because, like Paul says, the outer man does suffer decay, but the inner man's refreshed. And I'll tell you, what this looks like does not reflect what I feel like and what I'm driven to do with passion. And so he says here that what's happening in the street? Oh, great. For man goes to his eternal home while mourners go about in the street. People around me are all starting ready to mourn me because they're expecting me to die. It's an interesting thing. If you die in your 40s, that's tragic. Oh, you're so young. You die in your 50s. Oh, he was only 55. That's pretty young. You die in your 60s. Well, you know, that these days, that's painful. You die in your 70s, like 75 and up, well, you had a good life. I mean, if I die, as far as you're concerned, because I've had a good life. And so we find that mourners go about because we're getting there. Now, you can play denial here. I figure I'm going to be off the planet in about 5 years, which would be great. But people say, oh, no. That irritates people when I say that because they think I'm being morbid. I happen not to be afraid of heaven. And I think of that one couple where they were married for 70 years, and they died within a week of each other. And when he got to heaven and saw the beauty, the smells, and the glorious life, he turned to her and said, you know, Mabel, if it wasn't for those bran muffins, we could have been here 10 years ago. Now he gives in verse 6 a bit of counsel to those of us who are aging. He says in verse 6, remember again, we're going to navigate this. It's only as we know that the presence of God is with us and within us. Remember him before the silver cord is broken and the golden bowl is crushed and the pitcher by the well is shattered and the wheel at the cistern is crushed. Now what is this? In these days when he wrote this, every village had a center well. And the well had a rope, cistern had a rope. At the end of the rope was tied a vessel. And then everybody in the village had their own vessel. And they would bring it, usually women, and early in the morning, and they would set their vessel down. And then they would go ahead and lift the rope down until the other vessel, tied at the end of the rope, would lift the water. Then they'd pull it up, and then with that vessel, pour the water into their vessel, take it home, and their family would have water and would live. What he's doing here is in a very beautiful way describing our last breath. He's saying, if you notice, when that silver cord, the rope, but it's precious because it's life. It's a silver cord, but it's broken. And that golden bowl that's tied at the very end to bring up the water to live, it's been crushed. And the pitcher that you brought from home is shattered. And the wheel at the cistern is crushed. In other words, he's talking about that last moment that you bring up and you try to bring up the last breath of air to live like water. You know, I'm a pastor for 57 years. I've been with a lot of folks at home and in the hospital and watched them die. To listen carefully. And to be with them at that moment. But at that moment, I realize I'm not alone in that room. Look at the next verse. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Does the inhabitants of this house that's fallen apart have any place to go? What did Jesus say in the account of Luke 23, verse 46? Jesus is nailed to a cross. He's been tortured. He's not going to blow smoke. There's no time. And remember, he's got those two mocking thieves on the other side. And one guy figures it out that Jesus doesn't even deserve to be there, shuts the other guy down. And then what does he say to Jesus hanging on the cross? Lord, will you remember me when you come into your kingdom? They're hanging. What are the first words out of the mouth of Jesus? Today you will be with me in paradise. Acts chapter 7, verse 59. First martyr in the church, young man named Stephen. Stephen was bold. So much so they dragged him out of the city and they stoned him to death. And just before he dies, the record is he says, Lord, receive my spirit. See, when we were created, Genesis 1:27 says you're created in the image of God. He wanted a father-son, father-daughter relationship. But in chapter 2, verse 7, it says God took that piece of dirt, dust, and he breathed into it, and it became a living, the Hebrew word is nephesh, a living soul, a living life. Somewhere in your conception, somewhere in the womb, God breathed a soul into you. And that soul is who you really are. It doesn't become apparent until we become aged. And then we start seeing there is something real about me. And that soul has a place to go. Oldest book in the Bible, Job 14, verse 14, is where you find the question, if a man dies, will he live again? But in chapter 19 of Job, Job says, I will see God even in my resurrected flesh. You see, it's the fact that there is some place to go. You know, all the apostles were martyred except for one. John lived out his life. Every other one was actually had to seal their testimony with their own blood. I mean, you ever notice all 11, all 10 there died horrible deaths if you've studied it. I mean, we're talking skin ripped off the body, crucifixion upside down, heads lopped off. We're talking about spears, brains dashed out. Any one of them could have saved their life if they simply said that they did not see the resurrected Jesus Christ, and not one. Not one. And everyone died except for John. Why John? I have a theory on that. Bible's over here. The rest of them, they fled. Who followed Jesus to the foot of the cross? And that's why in John 19 we have an eyewitness to the death and of Jesus Christ. That was John. John already proved his devotion. He was willing to die for Christ. Followed him all the way to the very end when the others were hiding out. And then finally John does get arrested. The other guys are dead. AD 95, Domitian, Emperor of Rome. Says, well, let's not kill another one of these Christian leaders, because every time we do, they make him a martyr and the church grows. We'll just put him on the penal island of Patmos. That's just off the Asia Minor there, penal island off of the coast of Ephesus. And people will forget him. So they put John in AD 95 on the island of Patmos. He receives a visitor, by the way. Remember the book of Revelation? That was given to John on that island. Now, when you were on that island, there was not medical help. You did not have meals served. You sat there and you died and rotted, and they threw you in the Mediterranean Sea, and basically you're fish food. That's it. But what's interesting, most people don't know, John gets off the island. John gets off the island. And because after Domitian was assassinated, and I've told you this before, who was part of the group that assassinated Domitian? His wife. And men, if you walk away with anything, remember this: treat your wife well. She will be controlling the morphine at the end of your life. Just write that baby down. But the fact is after John, because Roman Senate repeals a lot of the edicts of Domitian, and John gets off the island, he goes back to his home church in Ephesus, because the bishop of those 7 churches there in Asia Minor, modern day Turkey. Well, this same John was there. He was there when he heard Jesus say these words in John 14, the first 3 verses. He's looking at his men and they're all depressed. Why are they all depressed? Well, they really thought, remember Palm Sunday, we'll talk about it this week. I get to preach this week all 5 times. Pray for me. Anyhow, I get to preach this week on why Palm Sunday? Because what's Hosanna, Hosanna? It's save now, save now. We want a warrior king. Beat up the Romans, and the apostles will be the big dogs in this new Jewish kingdom. But now Jesus talks about the fact he's going to be arrested and crucified and die. Well, he just burst their bubble. So they're all gathered together. Now he knows he's going to be arrested in a few hours, tortured, crucified the next day, and they're all depressed. What a great night. In that context, Jesus says in John 14, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God? Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many dwelling places, and if it were not so, I would have told you. Now I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, so that where I am, you will be also. Boy, in those rooms of people who passed away, took their last breath, I knew I was not alone. Somebody else was there to receive their soul, which makes sense to me. Face it, we live by faith, not by sight. We believe on the testimony of the eyewitness apostles. God, the Father, has caused us to recognize the truth so we can trust it, but you have never seen God. You haven't talked to Jesus in flesh. And so we're saved by faith. So we believe, and God causes us to see and believe the truth, but we haven't seen it yet. That when I take my last breath, and I open my eyes, and it's all real, I'm going to freak out. I think the first words Jesus will say is, Darryl, calm down, calm down. But it's real. Calm down, calm down. Well, I always believed it, but now I know. Calm down. But would it make sense? Jesus would be the first one to meet us, to introduce us to the very reality of what we have trusted and believed for all these years. And then he will introduce us to the Father and to all the other ones that have gone before us that we so miss. But that's when he says, the body, the dust returns to the dust from where it came, but the spirit returns to him who gave it. So when his body dies, does my soul have any place to go? I like the way Paul put it in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. He said this, verses 1 to 10. For we know that if the earthly tent, don't you love the way he describes this body? You don't move into a tent to live forever. For we know that if this earthly tent, which is our house, is torn down, little by little, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For indeed, in this house we groan, longing to be clothed with our dwelling from heaven. Remember that song, Things on Earth Grow Strangely Dim in the Light of His Glory and Grace? Inasmuch as we, having put it on, shall not be found naked, that is, without a body. It's not like you die and you're in the mist. But rather, indeed, while we are in this tent, we groan, being burdened, because we do not want to be unclothed, but to be clothed, in order that that which is mortal may be swallowed up by life. Now, he who prepared us for this very purpose is God, who gave us the Spirit as a pledge. That Greek word pledge means engagement ring. Therefore, being always of good courage, and knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. For we walk by faith, not by sight. But we are of good courage. Why? I say, we prefer rather to be absent from the body and to be at home with the Lord. Therefore also we have as our ambition, whether home or absent, to be pleasing to him. See, the death of the body is the death of the last enemy. It is this body that hurts. When people hurt us and they attack us, it's this body that is our enemy that causes our pain and misery. And the body will go back to dust. And no longer could we be dust. The enemy is returning to the dust, leaving us with the future. There's a great promise in Isaiah 46, verses 3 and 4 to old people. And the promise is basically this, Isaiah 46, verses 3 and 4. When God says, you know, Israel, I bore you as a child. I was there when you were born. I've borne you your whole life. I've borne you all the way to your old age. And not to worry, even in your old age, I will not abandon you, but I will carry you through. It was the French poet Victor Hugo. He's the guy who wrote Les Miserables. He was a Christian. He also wrote this, and I quote, for half a century, I have been writing my thoughts in prose and in verse, but I feel I have not said the 1,000th part of what is in me. When I go down to the grave, I can say like many others, I have finished my day's work. But I cannot say I've finished my life. My day's work will begin the next morning. The tomb is not a blind alley, it's a thoroughfare. It closes on the twilight and it opens on the dawn. And then he closes his journal back to chapter 12 of Ecclesiastes with these words, verse 8. Vanity of vanity, says the preacher, Kohelet, all is vanity. He repeats his theme of his whole journal. Life is Havel. It just is vaporous. It passes by so quickly. And because it passes by so quickly, some things we will understand. But we got to look for them. Because God has packed our bag with good things. Design, good, tov, meaning to extract enjoyment. To have a sense of significance and purpose in this life that we have, the first gift. But he says you've got to see them. So God can remember, shalat you. He can empower you to extract enjoyment from all that he has given you in this life under the sun, and you will experience a thing called contentment. Contentment, you need nothing more to enjoy your life. But as this life is havel, vaporous, there's going to be things you're never going to understand. In this vaporous life, there's things that don't seem fair. They don't seem right. Matter of fact, they might even anger you. But the reality, there is someone who's not under the sun who understands it all. And what I don't understand, my trust will help me get through. But then he says this, verse 9. In addition to being wise man, Kohelet also taught, that means the sage of sages, also taught the people knowledge. And he pondered, searched out, and he arranged many proverbs. It's interesting. These are not just reminiscings. He searched, he pondered, he searched out, he arranged. Notice he says many proverbs. Yeah, Solomon wrote the book of Proverbs. A lot of people don't understand that the first 9 chapters of the book of Proverbs are not proverbs. They're instructional statements. They were given to young men in curricula so that they could grow in wisdom and be young men in leadership of Israel. But the Proverbs start in chapter 10. And you will find from chapter 10 on 375 Proverbs. And that number 375 equals the numerical number of, guess what? Solomon's name. And so it's all poetic and all put together. And so therefore, from his research of the meaning of life, we have verses 10 and 11. The Kohelet sought to find delightful words and the right words of truth correctly. Delightful words. You ever heard the word kosher? Hebrew word kosher basically means clean. This here is the word yosher. Sounds alike because it's close. It means straight, honest. So he says even the very words. You notice he wasn't real wordy, was he? The very words were yosher. They were straight. And they were truth written correctly. The words of a wise man are like goads, and masters of these collections are like well-driven nails. These things, these truths are so driven in a wall that they can hold any weight. They're never going to pull out. They're never going to be proven to be wrong. They are given by one shepherd, one who cares. But beyond this, now we call this a double ending, because he already said in verse 9, in addition to, and now he doubles it again, but beyond this, it's a Hebrew way called a double ending to intensify what he's saying. But beyond this, my son, be warned. The writing of many books is endless, and excessive devotion to books is wearing to the body. Now, is he against books? No, but he is talking about book learning. So many people, because they've learned so much in school and education and books, that they feel that they're educated, they're brilliant. But everything they've learned has been from books, the reflections of others. Where he says wisdom is not learned from books. Wisdom is learned by the observation of life, observing life around you. And he says so. He uses these 2 popular proverbs when he says the writing of many books is endless. Excessive devotion to books is wearing to the body. This isn't about book study. This is about learning wisdom. Because what happens is, notice he says, now verse 13, the conclusion. I live in the academic world. And I'm amazed how many academics is that if you have a conclusion, this is true, you'll be eaten alive. Because the best you can do is come up with hypotheses, to come up with questions. And you have enough right questions, then you're intelligent. Matter of fact, C.S. Lewis wrote a small little book, you ought to read it, called The Great Divorce. And out of it, he talks about this, quote, there's this searcher, intelligent searcher, talking to the great white spirit. Here's their conversation. I can promise you no scope for your talents, only forgiveness for having perverted them. No atmosphere of inquiry, for I will bring you to the land, not of questions, but of answers, and you shall see the face of God. But the searcher responds, but we must all interpret those beautiful words in our own way. For me, there is no such thing as a final answer. The free wind of inquiry must always continue to blow through the mind, Must it not? Listen, said the white spirit. Once you were a child, once you knew what inquiry was for. There was a time when you asked questions because you wanted answers and were glad when you had found them. Become that child again, even now. So many people, their lives are based on opinions. And they're not sure. It could be this, could be that. Everybody wants to be an agnostic. The Latin word for agnostic is ignoramus. It's just basically, well, I don't know. I don't know. I'm so brilliant. There's no such thing as absolutes. We don't know. We're so bright. And he's just sitting saying, Solomon's saying, books can become wearisome. You need some conclusions. You need some answers. He says, what I've given you in this journal are answers. So he brings it to a close. Verse 13 and 14. The conclusion, when all has been heard, is fear God and keep his commandments, because this applies to every person. Throughout the Bible, it talks about fearing God. We get confused. What does it mean to fear God? Yahweh in the Old Testament means the exact same thing as the word for faith in the New Testament. New Testament, faith. Old Testament's fear. And you have the best definition right here when he says, fear God. What does that mean? It means keep his commandments. And the word keep is the idea, not perfection, but that you don't blow off what God says. Matter of fact, your desire is to protect, to guard, and to live out and implement the Word of God. And when you don't, it bums you out. And that's what 1 John 1:9 is all about. You confess it as sin. So I fear God. I have faith in God. How do you see that faith? How do you see that fear? And I strive in my life to keep, guard, protect, embrace the commandments of God. And then he closes with this, interesting. For God will bring every act to judgment. Everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. Interesting, he ends with that. Why would it be so important for us to know that whether it's good and it's hidden? You see, 1 Corinthians 3, it says that we're going to receive rewards based on what we've done. Wood, hay, straw. God doesn't double dip. That's all the stuff I already got rewarded for because I made sure everybody knew I did it. But what's the gold and silver and precious stones that the fire does not destroy, and you receive a reward? And the reward is reigning with Christ, implementing God's will in the new heavens, new earth with Christ. He says that's the stuff, all the stuff that honored the Heavenly Father, and nobody saw me. Nobody knew. God doesn't double dip, but he will make sure that everything good you've ever done to benefit someone else, to honor him, will not vanish and will not be forgotten. How does that make you feel? But then also, every evil thing. I think the Apostle Paul, when he wrote Romans, he had already studied this book under Gamaliel. We've talked about that. And the last paragraph of Romans 12 is when he says, now, do not repay evil for evil. It says, as much as possible within you, be at peace with all men. Now, notice he says, as much as it's possible. God's not at peace with all men, but he's offered the peace to all men. So it is, we're to, as his children, we're to do anything I can do to offer peace. Amy Clendenin, she's with the Lord now. Now she knows. But this is my first church. I'm 26 years old at the time. And after one Sunday, I noticed that she was really angry at me. She was about 82 at the time. Amy, what's wrong? Well, it's what you said last Sunday about me. What did I say last Sunday about you? Well, you called me the old lady in the mountain. I said, I don't think I said that. You said it because Lucille heard it too. And Lucille was this wacko neighbor of hers. He heard it too. We went back. I asked my wife, did you hear me say, no. We got the tape. It's not on the tape. I took the tape to dear Amy, played it. She says, well, somebody edited it. Somebody cut it out. And she was not. And I went on to ask forgiveness for something I never did. Only that one day she'll know that I did, that I didn't. But the fact is, why would I do something like that? I'll do anything without lying. I didn't say I did it. I simply said, please forgive me for the insensitivity of that being said. But the fact is, whatever you can do to be at peace with others, without compromising truth, of course. But here's the other side. Then he goes on to say, for vengeance is mine, thus saith the Lord, I will repay. Don't you be bringing about punishment because people have burned you, lied to you, betrayed you. That's revenge, bringing punishment. He says you don't have to do that. For you, be not overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. So you see your enemy who's hurt you. If they're hungry, give them something to eat. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. They don't become your best buddy. There's no trust. Trust is lost. But you don't punish, because God says if there's going to be any punishment, vengeance is mine, thus saith the Lord. Now, be honest. Vengeance is sweet. You burn me, hurt me, I want to come after you. But if I come after you, here's what I'm saying. I don't believe there's a God. I don't believe there's a God engaged in my life. And I don't believe God keeps his promises. Do I really want to say that? By trying to bring punishment to people who've hurt me? Oh, no. And that's what he promises right here. All the evil that's been done to you, that has hurt you, betrayed you, don't worry. God of justice, he says and promises right here, for every person, he will bring judgment on everything that was evil. So you don't have to. So take a breath. Just take a breath. And Solomon ends his journal. And he ends his journal, hopefully, that we are just wiser people. Remember the theme we started with? Kind of like you got this huge conveyor belt. And on this conveyor belt, every 24 hours you get an apple. Now you look at this thing, and some of the apples are red, and some are green, some are luscious. Some look a little beaten up. Matter of fact, is there something in that one? Each one's a day. And what happens is that we either let it pass and go, let me tell you about the apples I had in the past. And we live in the past. But you're never going to live in the past. You just let that apple pass right by you untouched. Or you're not too sure you like the apple, so, aren't any good apples coming down the road? I like a nice red luscious one. Meanwhile, the apple provided for you this day passes right by. Remember he said you got to see for God to be able to shalat you. And what is the key? You're never going to live in the future. Plan for it. You're never going to live in the past. Learn from it. But you only have one window to experience life. It's this window right now. And we just spent about 45 minutes of life together. I hope it was beneficial to you as it was to me.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to our Redeemer YouTube channel. If this is helpful for you, please make sure that you like this video, smash the subscribe button, and hit that bell icon. It will help us reach more people with biblical truth. Thank you so much.